Welcome to the program. I'm Chris O'Brien. It's been a rocky few months for Queensland's public service, with the new LNP government rolling out departmental change and severe job cuts. Campbell Newman says the cuts are needed to rein in the state's budget deficit, and I'll speak to the Premier about that shortly. But for those in the firing line, it's a hard reality to swallow. Tonight, 7:30 Queensland meets a former public servant who says she was assured personally by Campbell Newman before the election that her job was safe. Kieran McKechnie has this story.
During the election, Campbell Newman promised public servants had nothing to fear from him.
Labor have employed 20,000 more public servants than the people of Queensland can currently afford. If we failed to act in the way that we are, that Queensland would ultimately be the Spain of Australian states.
This evening, thousands of people gathered outside State Parliament to protest against the job losses.
We are in the process of putting together a budget, which is incredibly difficult. I suspect that there will be decisions in that process which will be distressing for us and distressing for the people of Queensland.
Distressing is an understatement for Lucille Reardon. The 33-year-old single mother lost her public sector job a month ago. She'd worked for the Queensland government for 5 years, yet got little warning when her job came to an end.
Yeah, we were told on the Thursday that we would finish up on that Friday. Then it was very scary and emotional because I didn't want to leave and I really enjoyed the work that I was doing and I didn't know what was going to happen.
With a big mortgage and the bills coming in, she's getting desperate. The former research officer has been applying for 10 to 12 jobs a day for weeks and still can't find work.
I've actually even put my name down at Coles. I don't mind what I do, I just need work because I am a single mum and I've got a mortgage and I don't mind what I do. So I've been applying for cleaning jobs, I've been putting my name down at Myers, everywhere.
The problem is Lucille Reardon is just one of so many public servants now on the jobs market. Even her sister lost her public service position on the same day. Nearly 5,000 workers have already got the cut. Another 15,000 are bracing for the same fate.
They've got mortgages and families, kids to educate. It's a very sad situation. Totally unmooted before the election, totally unexpected.
What we're producing in conjunction with the Together Union is a myths and facts document.
Since the wave of jobs cuts began, Queensland's union movement has been meeting regularly to plan what it'll do next.
We have the resources to be able to combat the government with these bad decisions, certainly in terms of public services. We'll have a very loud message around the state budget on September 11. We have a program in place to defend what we've got.
Many of you do jobs that aren't obvious to the woman on the street, but those jobs are still essential.
At this stage, that program has come in two forms. It's been getting its message out to the wider community and is planning a second mass rally on Parliament House. And it's commissioned its own audit to try to combat the government's bleak assessment of Queensland's coffers.
I think what we've proven to be the truth here is the Queensland government is totally exaggerated the financial position to be able to implement its strategy of slashing and burning services that they don't think are of any great value.
But others believe Campbell Newman is on the money.
The state has been flirting with bankruptcy potentially. The growth in debt over the last few years has been extremely high.
Mark McGovern is a senior lecturer at QUT's business school. While he agrees the Newman government had to take drastic action, he doesn't think it's taken the right approach.
It's not an easy problem to solve. However, I think they need to think more broadly. I think they need to actually think what strategies are applicable to a problem of this size, not just, we think job cutting will solve the problem. It won't.
He fears the sweeping job cuts could come at the expense of the economy.
We do need to make some cuts. There's no way of getting around that. But we need to make them in such a way that we come out stronger at the end. We don't sort of cut off our leg and walk around one-legged for the next 10 years. Cutting the jobs may reduce services and incomes more than it actually saves money in the net figure. It may fix something in the state budget this year, but it may cause economic problems and public costs across Australia in the longer term.
Finally, To all Queenslanders, thank you once
In the
again.
short term, that could also hurt the LNP's electoral fortunes, according to political economist Jeff Dow. He points out the Premier keeps saying the state has 20,000 more public servants than it can afford, not more than it needs. If Queenslanders feel they're not getting the services when and where they expect them, he says they'll let Campbell Newman know at the ballot box.
If it's perceived that some of the cutbacks are unnecessary, and it seems to me that that is the situation that pertains in Queensland, and Queensland's got a reputation of reacting fairly extremely to these sorts of high levels of dissatisfaction with the political process.
Lucille Reardon already feels a huge dissatisfaction with Campbell Newman's handling of the political process. He approached her while campaigning in Ashgrove during the election campaign, and she insists he gave her an assurance her job would be safe.
And I said to him, I'm a temporary employee, and he said, you know, my plan is not to do that, it's to make Queensland a better and stronger place. I'm not planning on doing anything, you know, I'm trying to fight for jobs, I'm trying to get people jobs. And then, you know, it was not even that much longer after I had that conversation with him, I lost my job. And my daughter was with me. And she really says to me, oh, there's Campbell, when she sees him on the news. Or we were speaking to another lady who doesn't work, and she said, oh, I don't work. And Violet, my daughter, said, did Campbell get rid of you too?
Lucille Reardon says she feels betrayed by Campbell Newman, but that's an emotion she doesn't have time for. What she needs right now is a job.
I'm trying to take it a day at a time, but my main focus is to try and get a job and keep me and Violet in our house.
Kieran McKechnie, the man who's bearing the brunt of criticism for those public service cuts, is the Premier. Tonight, an in-depth chat with Campbell Newman. How does he answer the questions from unions and workers about the cutbacks and other issues in his first 4 months in office? And in light of the latest news that New South Wales and Victoria look set to join the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Queensland's refusal and the Premier's battle this week with the Prime Minister take on greater significance. Well, Premier, welcome to 7:30 Queensland.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Lots to talk about. Obviously, disability funding has been the big issue, but let's begin by talking about some of those issues about job cuts that Kieran McKechnie raised in her story. Mark McGovern, the senior lecturer at QUT, he agreed with you about the need for drastic action, but he did question the tactic of job cuts. Is it the right way to do what you want to do?
Look, in the public sector, it's very difficult to actually achieve change in the first place. The longer you leave it in government, in a term, the less chance you have of making any change. So the government's approach has been to try and work with unions, as that was our first sort of requirement. That's the way we'd prefer to do business, but to do it quickly. The bottom line is we're doing this, we're making these tough decisions, and we're going to get it done as quickly as possible. I'm sort of saying to my ministers, I want it done, the heavy lifting done between now and the end of September, October. So, you know, I'm sorry we have to, but you know, we've got to get on and do this.
Do you have to do it that way? I think he's saying that you might be cutting off your nose to spite your face a little bit. The net cost to the overall economy of all these job cuts might be a little bit self-defeating. Well,
I want to separate two things. One is the real economy of Queensland, which is you know, the sort of the business economy, if you like, and the thing that really does generate wealth. And then there is the public sector, the Queensland government. We're saying that the future for the economy in Queensland is bright, and the government is working hard to get particularly tourism, agriculture, construction and mining resources really humming along, and we believe we're going to be very successful there. So we're going to create jobs in the real economy. In terms of the public sector, it's simply a matter of too much money being spent, not enough money coming in, and borrowing to pay wages. Now, I'm not quite sure what the commentators are saying and how they would expect us to do it differently, but if you're going to have this year a $4 billion deficit on a roughly $47 billion base, I mean, you just can't keep doing that and borrowing money, because that's what's been going on.
Sure, but
and it's still happening.
It sounds like you're aware of it, though, in those comments, that you're aware that it can be a cost to the economy overall just to lose all these public servants. And another point raised by Jeff Dow is that there's a difference between not affording public servants and not needing public servants. Surely you would concede that these public servants are doing things that the state needs.
Well, there's a way you can look at this. There are the vital frontline services, so police on the beat, ambulance officers, fireys, nurses and doctors in our hospitals, actually the frontline services, and then there are a range of support services, and then there are policy areas, there are sort of administrative areas that are on programs that might not be required. And what the ministers and the directors general are doing is looking carefully at every program, at every department, and trying to find ways to actually save money. Now, in the main, I think they're getting it right. Will there be issues on occasions where something's gone on, or frankly, even people who, for their own purposes, want to sort of even embarrass the government? Well, sadly, those things will occur. The point is, we have no choice. We have to actually balance the books. We intend to do that by the 2014-2015 financial year. I use this analogy a lot. It is like Queensland is in a power dive. It's a plane in a power dive. We're pulling back very hard on the control column.
Very strong language. Why do you keep using such drastic language?
Because that's how bad it is.
But doesn't it affect people's mood when you use that?
Well, again, let's separate it out. Queensland has a bright future. Economically, we can be a very strong state. But in terms of the public sector, which is funded from the taxes and charges that we pay, it's a basket case, and we have to sort it out, and we have a plan to do that.
That's a fine distinction, isn't it? Do you think people accept that distinction you make there?
Well, I think people do. I know that the Labor Party, particularly Curtis Pitt, have been trying to sort of confuse the two issues, but they are separate. They are separate. And the point is, we fund the Queensland public sector, the government, out of the taxes we pay. The choices are clear. We can either cut costs or we can raise taxes massively. Now, that's what we're trying to deal with. We didn't create it. Anna Bligh, Andrew Fraser did, and I'm not going to just get into the blame game, but that's the fact. And we're sorting out the mess. And for the Labor Party now to complain about what we're doing, well, it's a bit like the arsonist set the house on fire. The fire brigade's rocked up, and the arsonist complaining that the fire brigade's trying to put the house fire out.
There's a bit of blame game there, though. And I put this question to Jeff Senior a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to verbal him because his answer to me when I said, "What is the statute of limitations on blaming Labor?" and he virtually said, "Never." He wants to just always remind people. Do you agree with that? Will there come a time when it's just your own decisions and nothing to do with what Labor did?
Chris, I'm always happy to take accountability for the decisions that I make in public administration. Not a problem. You know, perhaps Jeff was just being a bit more combative that evening. But I say this, that right now, no one can say that it's otherwise. You know, we started this financial year with about $64 billion worth of debt. And despite the things that we're doing, because of the path that we've already inherited, the debt will be $85 billion in the 2014-2015 financial year.
It must hurt you when the commentary is that you're constantly negative, you're constantly bagging Labor, and the achievements which you pointed at the end of your 100 days can get lost because you seem to be negatively bagging what's gone on before.
Chris, I don't know who's saying that, but it's complete nonsense. Absolute bunkum. I don't spend my days bagging Labor. I do spend my days explaining why we're making these necessary, tough decisions, why we're determined to execute this plan to get the state back in the black. You know, well, at the moment, the figure is 4,400 net since we started. Out of 204,000 people in the public service, we've lost about 4,400 jobs. So it's actually gone up since the last report because we've employed casual teachers. So that's about 2%. Now, of all the noise from the unions, who frankly should work more cooperatively with us, and the Labor Party, you'd think it was a lot more. Every one of those persons... But
it is going to be 20,000 though. You've warned it will be 20,000.
It could potentially be much higher is all I'll say. It could be a lot higher, but I wouldn't see it being more than 20,000.
It's a bit confusing. Do you really think, because you said in Parliament 20,000, then sometimes you seem to go away from that figure?
Well, it's like this. I don't want any more people to lose their jobs. Now, ideally, we could stop it right now. I mean, I made the point, by the way, at a press conference recently, actually it was at a speaking engagement, that if the unions had proposed a pay freeze, and they haven't, and I'm not, by the way, but if they had proposed a pay freeze for this 3-year term, do you know what? We probably could have saved those jobs. Full stop.
I think that caused a
I'd be in it.
Feather ruffling when you said that.
Well, this just shows the insincerity of the people.
But I've asked you about politicians' pay before, and you said no way would you freeze politicians' pay.
I'm happy. No, hang on. It was in the context of talking about the generous above inflation pay increases that we're offering the unions.
Lucille, in our story, she felt let down by you, that she had an assurance that job cuts were not what you were about.
Well, I'm not about job cuts, and I continue to say that it gives me no pleasure. It's not an ideological thing, and some commentators, and again the Labor Party, sort of suggest that, oh, you know, we're sort of anti people in the public service. It's nonsense. To do the things that we need to do to build Queensland up, to execute our plan to get the state humming, we need hard-working, diligent, professional public servants. The only reason why people are going is because we have this financial problem.
You said before you did not want to put taxes up. That's not something that would be palatable. But this very day, you've talked about a levy for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Wouldn't that have put taxes up?
Well, let's be very clear about what I'm talking about there. On Tuesday night in Canberra, the Prime Minister took the Premiers and the First Ministers of the Territories to a dinner at the Lodge. And during that meeting, I actually proposed that if the Prime Minister wanted to see the NDIS go forward to provide quality care for people with disabilities, there was a way, and that was to actually have an increase in the Medicare levy, or actually have an NDIS levy, because it's meant to be a national scheme, and that's what the Productivity Commission actually recommended. So the Prime Minister had a golden moment with a Liberal Premier proposing it, and guess what? Liberal Premiers and Labor Premiers and First Ministers at that table saying, we'll back you.
Not even Tony Abbott agrees with you. He says it should come from general revenue.
Well, look, I'm not here to have an argument with Tony Abbott. I'll just say that he wasn't at the dinner and he's not the Prime Minister. Julia Gillard's the Prime Minister, and she has been given a fair dinkum offer from me, and I continue to reiterate it. I'm not embarrassed to say this. If we're serious about providing quality care for people with disabilities, then the offer is there. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with her, notwithstanding what the Coalition has said federally, and say this needs to happen. And I hope the other Premiers and First Ministers continue to provide that backing that they said they would the other night.
Is it appropriate for you to be telling us what gets said behind closed doors at the Lodge?
That's a really good question, and a very fair one. Look, it's like this. I was asked on Wednesday morning in a couple of interviews, a doorstop and also by Fran Kelly of the ABC, about some of these matters. And if you go back and have a look at what I said, I wasn't prepared to talk about it. But over the last 24 hours since I've come back from Canberra, I've seen the Prime Minister engage in a very concerted political campaign against the Liberal state premiers. She's trying to suggest that the NDIS won't happen because of our opposition. It's completely and utterly untrue. The Prime Minister had an opportunity to show political courage, seize this commitment to fund the NDIS in the way that we said.
So that's why you feel it's okay?
Well, I didn't take the story to the Australian newspaper. There was this incredible situation, this golden moment, and I said to the Prime Minister, this is your Obama moment, Prime Minister. It's like
How did she take that advice?
Well, if it had been me, I'd have gone, you know, in the old kids' game, I'd have gone snap, you know, if I'd been the PM, I would have taken it. It was a terrific opportunity to not only get the scheme fully funded, but to bring it forward. You see, it isn't meant to actually happen till 2018.
The perception has been that Queensland did not offer any money for it, and you've explained the financial reasons for that. And I come back to the general comment I made about how you have been perceived as Premier in the 4 months since you won the election. You made the point quite clearly after the 100 days that you were pleased with the achievements, that you had made promises about cost of living, about restoring stamp duty concessions and those things. Have those achievements been overshadowed by perceptions of hard-heartedness, job cuts, no money for disability and that sort of thing?
There is $920 million being spent by this government this financial year on supporting people with disabilities, less than $300 million by the Commonwealth. The Labor Party and Labor-leaning commentators, of course, are going to label me as they labelled me for years in City Hall. They've been doing that forever. And I say to viewers, just spin, just their nonsense. I care about people with disabilities. I've got a staff member with a disability. I have relatives with disabilities. I care just as much about people and their needs as anybody who's in the Labor Party. And what I'm trying to do is actually find the savings so that in the 2014-15 financial year we can revisit this whole thing, and I've said this time and time again in the last 3 days, revisit the whole thing and put more money in, because we want to provide more funding as a state to meet what the other states are doing.
I'd like to give you an opportunity here to respond to other major issues that have come up in your premiership so far, and this is more in the social area of life. You'd be aware that a group has been set up called Queenslanders for Equality, and these are parents and friends of gay and lesbian people who believe that this government is against their best interests.
Well, it's simply not true, again, and I've got well-known views on and very supportive views on terms of the needs of gay and lesbian people, and you know, I've got a track record as well of supporting various initiatives and things that they've done in their sort of circles, is the way I should put it. So I'm sad they feel that way. What they perhaps should do as well, though, is realise that there's a whole lot of people on the other side of the debate who totally and unequivocally disagree with them, and I have to listen to them as well.
And Smart State, I want to ask you about Smart State too. The slogan is one thing, but I think what Peter Beattie set out to do was to shift the emphasis in Queensland from what he used to call rocks and crops, mining and agriculture and tourism, and introduce a whole new area of life in Queensland, innovation. And I think we have seen the benefits of that, have we not, with medical institutes and so forth. By doing away with the Smart State slogan, as I say, that can be defended, are you also at risk of losing the emphasis on that part of the Queensland life? Not at all.
And I'm glad you said it was a slogan, because it was a slogan, but it was a great idea. And again, going over the last 10 years I've been in public life, you can go back and see on the public record where, again, perhaps at times against my own party, I've actually backed Smart State. I think it's really important, and we'll continue to support biotech and IT and the like. And indeed, my team, Tim Nichols as Minister for Trade, Jeff Seeney as Minister for State Development, and myself will continue to promote those particular sectors.
Do you like our studios?
Wonderful studios. I was proud to be, I think, one of the first people interviewed in the new studios.
Premier, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.